You did everything right. You welcomed them into your family. You showed up at the wedding with a full heart. You smiled in every photograph. You offered help when they needed it. You learned their preferences, their schedules, the things they liked and didn't like. You bit your tongue more times than you can count. You tried, and still, something feels off. They're polite. They show up for holidays. They're not cruel. But there's a wall, a careful distance, a warmth that never quite arrives. And every time you leave their house, you drive home wondering what you did wrong, or whether you'll ever truly be close to the person your child chose to spend their life with. If that feeling is familiar, you are not alone, and you are not imagining it. Millions of parents carry this quietly. They don't talk about it at dinner parties. They don't post about it on social media. But in the private conversations, with close friends, with therapists, with themselves at 3 in the morning, it is there. The ache of a relationship that hasn't become what they hoped it would. Today, we're going to talk about one of the most painful and least discussed dynamics in family life. Why your son-in-law or daughter-in-law seems cold, what's actually driving that distance, and 5 specific things you can do to start changing it, without pressure, without confrontation, and without losing your dignity in the process. Welcome to Family Bonds After 60. Let's begin. Before we get into the reasons, I want to say something important. The distance you feel from your child's partner is not necessarily about you. It is not necessarily about anything you did. And it is not necessarily permanent. What it is, almost always, is complicated. It involves 2 families, 2 sets of expectations, 2 completely different definitions of what closeness should look like. And it involves your child, who is standing in the middle of all of it, trying to love everyone at once. That context matters. Because when we understand what's actually happening, we stop taking it personally. And when we stop taking it personally, we become far more capable of doing something about it. Let's start with the reasons. This sounds simple, but it is one of the most misunderstood dynamics in any in-law relationship. When 2 people get married, they are not just joining their lives. They are, in a very real sense, creating a new family unit. A unit with its own rules, its own rhythms, its own identity. And one of the unspoken tasks of any new marriage is for both people to establish where they end and their families of origin begin. For your child's partner, this means something very specific. It means learning to be in relationship with you, the parent of the person they love most, while also protecting the integrity of their own new family. This is not a rejection of you. It is a necessary developmental task. Every healthy marriage requires it. But here is where the friction begins. Because many parents, and I say this with care, not criticism, many parents expect the relationship with their child to look the same after marriage as it did before. The same frequency of visits, the same ease of access, the same centrality in their child's emotional life. And when it doesn't, when the calls become less frequent, when holidays get divided, when the son-in-law or daughter-in-law seems to be putting up walls, it feels like loss. It can feel like rejection. It can feel like the person your child chose is somehow taking them away. But that feeling, however real it is, may be pointing to something worth examining. Not a flaw in the in-law, but an adjustment that the relationship itself is asking you to make. The therapist and family counselor Deb Dearmond puts it this way: when your son gets married, the mother-son relationship has to change. Not end, but change. And how well you navigate that change has everything to do with how close you will be to your child's partner going forward. Safety is a word that gets used a lot these days, but in the context of family relationships, it has a very specific meaning. Feeling safe with someone means feeling like you can be yourself around them without consequence. It means trusting that your mistakes won't be held against you. It means believing that the person you're with genuinely wants good things for you, not just for themselves, not just for their child, but for you. For many daughters-in-law and sons-in-law, that feeling of safety with a parent-in-law takes a long time to develop, sometimes years. Sometimes it never fully arrives. Why? Because the stakes are so high. This is not just any relationship. This is the parent of the person they love. Any misstep, any misunderstanding, any moment of perceived criticism, it carries weight that a friendship wouldn't. It can affect their marriage. It can affect their children. It can affect everything. And so many sons-in-law and daughters-in-law protect themselves by maintaining a careful distance, not because they dislike you, but because closeness feels risky when trust hasn't been fully established. What creates that trust? Consistency, patience, the absence of judgment, and the presence of genuine curiosity, not about what they're doing wrong, but about who they actually are. Here is something that many parents never consider. Your child's partner had a whole life before they met your family. They have their own wounds, their own history, their own complicated relationship with the idea of family. They may have had difficult in-laws in the past. They may have grown up in a home where love was complicated. They may carry things you don't know about that make warmth feel unfamiliar or even threatening. None of that is your fault, but all of it is relevant, because it means that the coldness you're experiencing may have very little to do with you and everything to do with what they're carrying. This one is hard to hear, but it is one of the most common drivers of distance between parents-in-law and their children's spouses. Your child loves you. That love is real, deep, and long established. For their partner, especially in the early years of marriage, that existing love can feel like competition. Not because they want to replace you, but because they are still figuring out where they fit in your child's emotional landscape. When a mother calls her son every day, the daughter-in-law may not say anything, but inside she is tracking it. When a father offers his daughter advice about a decision she already made with her husband, the son-in-law may nod politely, but inside he is noting it. These moments accumulate, and over time they can harden into a story. I will never be as important to my partner as their family is. I am always second. I will never fully win. That story, even when it's not consciously held, shapes behavior. It creates withdrawal, coolness, quiet resentment, not because your child's partner is difficult, but because they are hurting in a way they may not even have words for. The research on this is consistent. Family therapists across the board note that the mother-in-law and daughter-in-law relationship in particular is one of the most fraught in all of family dynamics, precisely because of this competition dynamic. Both women love the same man, both want to be central to his life, and neither may fully acknowledge how much the other's presence affects them. The same dynamic exists, in slightly different form, between fathers-in-law and sons-in-law, between any parent and the person who has stepped into their child's life as a primary partner. What helps? Taking yourself out of the competition entirely, actively, visibly rooting for the marriage, making it clear through your words and your actions that you are not a rival, that you want them to be close, that their relationship with your child is not a threat to yours, but an extension of it. I want to be careful here, because this is not about blame. It is about honesty. There is a well-documented list of mistakes that parents-in-law commonly make. Most of them are made without any harmful intention whatsoever. They come from love, from habit, from a genuine desire to be helpful, but they land badly, and they leave a mark, stopping by unannounced, offering advice on how to raise the grandchildren, sharing an opinion about a decision that was not yours to make, comparing the way things were done in your family to the way they do things in theirs, criticizing your child's partner, even once, even gently, to your child. assuming that closeness you feel entitles you to a level of access they haven't offered. Each of these on its own seems small, but for the daughter-in-law or son-in-law on the receiving end, they accumulate into a pattern that says, "My boundaries are not respected here. My family is not valued here. I am being evaluated, and I am not measuring up." Here is something that every parent-in-law needs to understand. The rules of your child's house are their rules, not yours. And showing respect for those rules, even when they differ from yours, even when they seem unnecessary, is one of the single most powerful things you can do to build trust with your child's partner. One family counselor described it this way. A grandmother was babysitting her grandson. She knew the parents didn't allow toy weapons in the house. She disagreed with that rule. But when her grandson wanted army men at the store, she bought them and then sat at the kitchen table and carefully cut the weapon out of every single one of the figurines. She handed them to her grandson without the weapons. He was unimpressed, but the daughter-in-law, when she found out, felt something shift. This woman disagreed with us, and she still honored our wishes. That is a person I can trust. That is how trust is built, not through grand gestures, through small, consistent acts of respect. Sometimes the distance between parents-in-law and their child's partner has nothing to do with conflict or competition or unmet expectations. Sometimes it is simply the result of a relationship that has never had the space to breathe. Think about when you actually see your son-in-law or daughter-in-law. Holidays, family gatherings, birthdays, occasions with an agenda, surrounded by other people, structured around meals and traditions and the performance of togetherness. These are not the conditions under which real relationships develop. Real relationships develop in quiet, unstructured time, over a cup of coffee, on a walk, in a conversation that doesn't have anywhere it needs to go. If the only context in which you know your child's partner is the context of the extended family, with all its history, its dynamics, its noise, then of course the relationship feels thin. You haven't had the chance to know them as a person, separate from the role they play in your family. And here is the harder truth. Many parents-in-law wait for their child's partner to initiate that kind of closeness. They wait for the invitation, the gesture, the opening. But the son-in-law or daughter-in-law is also waiting to see if it is safe, waiting to see if you are someone they can relax around. Someone has to go first. And in most cases, the person with the greater power in the relationship, the parent, the elder, the one who has been there longest, is the one best positioned to make that first move. Now, let's talk about what you can actually do. These are not tricks. They are not manipulations. They are 5 genuine shifts in how you show up in this relationship. Shifts that create the conditions for something warmer to grow. Many parents-in-law carry a quiet grief they have never named. The grief of the relationship they imagined. The daughter-in-law who would be like a second daughter. The son-in-law who would slot into the family like a missing piece. And the relationship they actually got. That grief is real, and it deserves acknowledgement, not indulgence, not performance, but honest acknowledgement. Because here is the thing about unexpressed grief. It shows up in the relationship anyway. It shows up as resentment, as pressure, as a subtle but persistent sense of disappointment that the other person can feel, even if they can't name it. When you do the internal work of letting go of the relationship you expected, when you genuinely grieve it and then genuinely release it, something changes. You become available to the relationship that is actually there, which may be different from what you imagined, but which may, over time, be genuinely good. This is not resignation. This is maturity. And it is the necessary foundation for everything else. This sounds obvious, But it is astonishing how many parents-in-law do not actually know their child's partner as a person. They know them as a role. The daughter-in-law, the son-in-law, the person who married my child. But they don't know what they're passionate about, what they're afraid of, what they dream about, what their childhood was like, what they find funny. The reason is usually not lack of interest. It is lack of opportunity, and sometimes lack of courage. Real curiosity requires vulnerability. It requires being willing to be changed by what you learn. But when a parent-in-law makes a genuine effort to know their child's partner as a person, not as an appendage of their child, not as a person to be approved of, but as a fully realized human being with their own interior life, something shifts. The other person feels it, and they respond. This might look like asking a question you've never asked before. Not about the children, not about the house, not about work. Something personal. Something that says, I am interested in you, not just in what you do for my child, in who you are. This is perhaps the most powerful thing a parent-in-law can do, and it is the one most often overlooked. Supporting the marriage means more than not interfering. It means actively, enthusiastically, unambiguously being on the side of your child's relationship with their partner. It means not listening to complaints about the spouse without redirecting toward resolution. It means not making comments, however joking, however gentle, that subtly undermine the partner's standing. It means when your child comes to you with a frustration about their marriage, saying something like, have you talked to them about this? Because that's where this needs to go. It means making it clear to your child's partner, through your behavior if not your words, that you are not a rival for your child's loyalty, that you want their marriage to thrive, that their happiness with their partner is something you actively celebrate. This shift from being someone who needs to be managed to being someone who is genuinely in the corner of the marriage changes everything. Because suddenly your son-in-law or daughter-in-law is no longer defending against you. They are, possibly for the first time, on the same side as you. This is the one that requires the most humility and the most patience. Every relationship has a pace, a rate at which trust develops, at which walls come down, at which warmth becomes natural rather than performed. Your child's partner has their own pace for this, and it may be very different from yours. You may be ready for closeness tomorrow. They may need years. That is not a failing. It is simply where they are. Following their lead means letting them set the pace of the relationship without pressing, without expressing disappointment, without making them feel guilty for needing time. It means accepting invitations when they're offered and not creating pressure when they're not. It also means following their lead on access. If they prefer to be contacted through your child, contact them through your child. If they've asked you to call ahead before visiting, call ahead every time, without resentment. These are not arbitrary rules. They are requests for a particular kind of respect, and honoring them consistently, without negotiation, tells your child's partner something important. I can be trusted with your boundaries. That trust, once established, has a way of expanding. The relationship between a parent and their child's partner is not built in months. It is built over years, over decades, over the long, slow accumulation of ordinary moments, of showing up, of keeping your word, of being the kind of person who can be counted on. This means releasing the urgency, the desire to resolve the tension, to break through the wall, to finally have the close relationship you've been hoping for. Urgency in this context is counterproductive. It creates pressure, and pressure, in a relationship that is still finding its footing, produces exactly the opposite of warmth. What produces warmth is patience, consistent, undemanding presence. The message, communicated not through words, but through behavior over time. I am here. I am not going anywhere. I am not keeping score. I am not waiting for you to perform closeness for me. I am simply here. Whenever you're ready. There is a beautiful piece of wisdom from family therapists who work with in-law relationships. They note that some of the closest, most genuinely warm relationships between parents-in-law and their children's partners develop slowly, even painfully slowly. And then, at some point that is impossible to predict, they turn a corner. Something shifts. The defenses come down. And what was once a polite, managed relationship becomes something real. You cannot force that turning, but you can create the conditions for it. And the conditions are these: safety, patience, respect, and the quiet, persistent message that you are worth knowing. Let me leave you with something that the marriage counselors and family therapists who work with these relationships say again and again. The parents-in-law who end up closest to their children's partners are almost never the ones who push the hardest. They are the ones who waited the longest, who made the most room, who asked the most genuine questions, who showed the deepest respect for a relationship that was not theirs to control. They are the ones who understood that love, in this context, is not a competition, that there is room in a family for many kinds of closeness, and that the most powerful thing you can do for your child, the thing that honors them most deeply, is to love the person they chose, not because you have to, not because you always agree, but because they chose them, and you trust your child's heart. That trust, visible, consistent, generous, is the foundation of everything. You are not going to fix this relationship in a week. You may not fix it in a year. But if you show up again and again with patience and curiosity and genuine respect, something will change. It may not look like what you imagined, but it will be real. And real is better than perfect. Every small act of respect, every moment of genuine curiosity, every time you follow their lead without complaint, you are writing something. You are writing the story of who you are in this family, and that story matters. Not just for you and your child's partner, but for your grandchildren who are watching all of it, absorbing all of it, and forming their own ideas about what family looks like. This has been Family Bonds After 60. Take care of yourself. And remember, the relationship you're building now is the one your grandchildren will remember.